Well, hello, everybody. First of all, thank you for coming today. Go ahead, next slide, please. So most of you are familiar with our Women's Imaging Center, so we're very, very proud of this. But a lot happens on the other side of that waiting room door. And so I kind of wanted to let you see kind of what goes on after how the mammogram happens and what happens after those images are taken. So next slide. So now many of you may notice I wasn't up here last year, but I had a really good excuse. So this is my excuse. This is Crosby. I was at the birth of my very first grandchild. He is 1 year old. Huge fan of everyone he meets. He's just fantastic. So this is why I wasn't here. Next slide. So screening mammogram. Let's talk about that. Most all of you have had one. This is a routine annual exam for evaluation of asymptomatic breasts. All right? That's really important. It's the gold standard for breast cancer detection still today. So you might hear of other things for imaging breast cancer, for detecting breast cancers. This is still the gold standard for detection. It should be done every year, starting at the age of 40. 35 if you have high risk factors, like you have multiple first-degree relatives, like a mother and sister, or if you are known BRCA positive or other high risk factors, you can start earlier at 35. But we recommend it every year at 40, as does the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. It's not used for lumps or other worrisome findings like an abnormal breast discharge. That we want you to see your doctor for because we have a special type of mammography for. So this is for asymptomatic breasts. And it's still the best thing that you can do to detect breast cancer early. All right, next slide. So how's a screening mammogram done? Well, at Gritman, we actually pioneered 3D mammography in the Inland Northwest. We're really proud of that. We had 3D mammography nearly 2 years before anyone else in the area, including Boise, Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, everyone in the area. We were really on the forefront of this technology. And all of our mammograms, all of our screening mammograms here at Gritman are performed by 3D mammography. And they have been from the very beginning, so we're really proud of that, the meaning of the technology. The Women's Imaging Center is a fully ACR and MQSA certified facility, which means we undergo regular accreditation. And so how the screening mammogram is done, and most of you are aware, we take those in 2 projections. So next slide. And this is the equipment that we do, that we take the mammogram on. This is a Hologic top-of-the-line 3D imaging system. And next slide, and the images it generates is this. So you can see you have 2 views of each breast. You have the right breast, left breast, side to side, and then right breast, left breast, top to bottom. And that's what we're looking at as radiologists once we get that mammogram, okay? So what happens to that data, that images, once they're taken? This is where really all that happens. So the images are then sent through a second look computer analysis that flags areas that the computer sees in the images that says, I think the radiologist might want to look at this a little closer. The images are then sent to a dedicated high-resolution read station for the radiologist's interpretation. It's a special read station that, through that computing power, is able to generate that 3D model of the breast that makes 3D mammography so powerful, all right? Does all the post-processing. And then the images are interpreted by the radiologist on that special workstation throughout the day. And the final results are sent to your doctor, and usually we read those the very same day. I think you might notice that, but the turnaround time is really quick on these. We do that for a reason, and we know it's important. So next slide. So, and there's that dedicated workstation, the lovely radiologist that might be reading your exams. So you can see it's a little bit special in that it's a little different than our regular routine workstation. That's to the left. The one to the right is that dedicated 3D workstation. Next slide. So what happens once we read that exam? Well, we generate a report, all right? And that report is generated by voice recognition transcription program. So it's immediately uploaded into your medical record, which means it's immediately available to your doctor, and it's immediately available to you via your MyChart patient portal. So most of the time, by the time you get home, or later on that evening for sure, you're gonna have a report available on your portal if you wanna look it up. So that's kind of cool. So, and then a secondary explanation letter is then generated and sent to you via US mail. All right, and that notifies you your results and if there's any request for follow-up. So next slide. Here's an example of that letter here, okay? So it really has 3 main informational items, okay? The first is the results of your exam, of course. So if it's negative or if we need additional follow-up imaging. A statement of your breast density, and that's something that's new that's required that now all facilities include in this letter. And that just says, do you have very dense breasts? Meaning that you have a lot more fibroglandular tissue that might make it a little bit more difficult to detect breast cancer, or do you have less dense breasts. That's just a statement of that, so you know that as a background. And then we give you instructions as to follow-up. Most of the time it's going to be follow-up in 1 year. We didn't see anything wrong. But sometimes you're going to get the dreaded additional information or additional imaging requested letter. Okay, so let's talk about that just a little bit. So what does it mean if you get that additional imaging or additional information requested letter, come on back letter? So first of all, take a deep breath. It doesn't mean we found breast cancer, all right? It does mean in any way that the original mammogram was faulty. Doesn't mean that we didn't get enough information, nothing like that. All it means is that we saw something as radiologists on your mammogram that said, I want to look at that a little closer, all right? That's all that means. Because our breasts change throughout the year, throughout our lives, as we all know. Our breasts change, and that change is something that sometimes can cause us to go, is that change something I really want to worry about or not? And that's why we call you back, okay? So only about 10% of screening mammograms are going to call back too. So it's not very common, but it's not a rare event either. So don't be alarmed if that happens to you. All right, next slide. So first of all, it can be scary, all right? You got called back. It's like, oh, did they find breast cancer, all right? So again, take a deep breath. Doesn't mean we found breast cancer. It just means that we want to look at it a little closer. And 85% of the time, what this means is that we're going to, with that additional imaging, we're going to find out exactly what we need, and we're going to say, we just do a follow-up in 1 year. So more than 85% of the time, we're going to be conclusive and say follow-up in 1 year, all right? If we do find something that we need to evaluate further, either by additional imaging or by biopsy, 99% of the time we can do that locally, and that's really important. So we know we're going to get the care right here locally. All right, next slide. So what additional imaging might be needed? So when you do get that letter, what to expect when you come back? Well, you're either going to be asked to come back and have an additional mammogram done, a very special mammogram, or an ultrasound, most likely. Okay, so next slide. So, and I did want to say on that, if we do call you back and you get the letter, immediately we're going to be working with your provider to make sure that we get you in as soon as possible, because we know that that's a scary situation. We want to get you back in, and usually it's within that week. So we're actually working behind the scenes immediately when that letter goes out, okay? So a focused mammogram, well, basically, when we're looking at a screening mammogram, we're looking at the entire breast. So focused mammograms allows us to focus on one particular area of the mammogram and help us determine whether what we're seeing, whether it's a mass, what it might look like, whether it's calcifications. Can we look at those a little bit better? All right, the next slide. So we're all familiar with the regular paddle on the side. That's for the screening mammogram. And you can see it's a large paddle, and it covers the whole breast. The ones on the right there, those are special focus paddles. You can see they're much smaller, and they're focused to look at a very specific area of the breast. And this is what happens when we take that image with those focus paddles. Next slide. Well, this is our ultrasound room. So if we called you back for an ultrasound, this is with the ultrasound room. This is where we do that. But the next slide shows a picture of the focused mammogram. So you can see on the left is a regular screening mammogram. And I don't know if you can see, but they're very difficult to see. Up in the upper part of the breast there's a group of little calcifications that we would have picked up on the screening mammogram, that dedicated workstation. We would have said, I can't see those very well. I want to examine them a little closer. And so you can see on the right side, that's that special paddle, and you're getting a very focused view of the breast. You can see up there in the upper part of the breast there's that little line of white, looks like grains of salt. Now I could see those much better, don't you agree? And I can characterize those calcifications and say, is that something that I want to biopsy, or do they not look really all that suspicious at all? So next slide. If we did call you back for an ultrasound, we do that, and the power of ultrasound is it allows us to determine whether a mass might be solid or just a cyst. And so you can see on the far left, that's a solid mass, but it's nice and round and regular. It's been there for a while. We don't really think that that's worrisome. In the middle, and you can see that blackness, that's a cyst. And that's what a cyst looks like on ultrasound. Those are not cancer. They don't turn into cancer. We don't worry about those, but they can look like a mass on a mammogram, and so the ultrasound determines whether it's a cyst or not. And then on the far right is a more worrisome mass that we might determine whether we want to do a biopsy of or something like that. And the ultrasound would allow us to get that biopsy. So that's why we do an ultrasound. Next slide. So here's our promise to you if you do get called back with that dreaded letter. Well, first of all, we're going to, once we do the additional images, we're going to discuss with you those images. We're going to discuss with you why we brought you back. We're going to carefully explain the results of your exam to you, results of that, not only your screening mammogram, but the additional imaging that we did. We're going to review the images with you, if it's appropriate, and we're going to give you recommendations for follow-up. You're going to see a radiologist that day. We are not going to let you leave the Women's Imaging Center before you get the results of that follow-up exam, because it's scary, and we don't want you going home without knowing absolutely what's wrong. And if we did find something wrong, we're going to provide a really clear path for you for any additional tests or biopsies that you might need. So I hope that this was helpful for you to give you sort of that behind-the-scenes peek and make it that dreaded, we want you to come back letter a little less scary if it happens. All right? Thank you.